All right, Alex. So building trust is absolutely critical. All right. And a lot of people struggle with how do I actually do that? So I put a framework together, and the 9 steps to build trust are.
We have a really exciting announcement for all of our viewers and listeners out there. The new book, Endless Customers by Marcus Sheridan and the team here at Impact, comes out in April of 2025, which is really exciting. But you know what's more exciting? You can go right now, today, to endlesscustomers.com and pre-order your copy. And if you do so, there's all sorts of great bonus content that you're going to get that you wouldn't normally get if you don't pre-order. So again, go to endlesscustomers.com and pre-order your copy today so you can learn how to earn trust and win more business in the age of AI. Welcome back to Endless Customers. I'm your host, Alex Winter, and today we are joined by a special guest. Her name is Hannah Eisenberg. She's a certified coach with Trust Builder Coach. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's very exciting for me to be here.
Yes, it's very exciting for us too. She's talking to us all the way from Florence, Italy. How's everything in Italy? You guys having a good time over there?
Florence is gorgeous this time. I mean, I'm lying. It's gorgeous any time of the year, but right now we have Christmas markets and it's nice and crisp air, so beautiful.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you today. We're talking about something that we talk a lot about here with They Ask You Answer and with Endless Customers, but I feel like we mention it. We talk about how important it is, but we don't really get into the how and how to implement and the best ways to navigate building trust. And trust is definitely the topic of the day today. So my first question for you, just to dive into it, is what is trust and why is it so hard to define? We know what it is, but like, why is it so hard to actually define what that means when we talk about business?
You hit on something really important here because throughout all my marketing career, throughout all my They Ask You Answer coaching, trust has always been the one thing. And it was very frustrating to me that people don't make it more of a priority. And then I was thinking, why is that? And it's because this thing that we all know inherently is so important, it's fuzzy, it's complicated, it's layered, it's multidimensional. So let's start with your first question. What is trust? If you ask the American Psychology Association, trust is really just the reliance or the confidence and someone's dependability or in something or on something, right? So we have to rely or depend on just someone else doing something. Okay, that's probably the definition that everyone would kind of give you. I have to rely on someone, I can depend on someone. But for me in business, it's much more layered. Right? If I look at trust and looking back, this has always been really something that I was fascinated with. For me, trust is really that willingness of me, of the person extending trust, to be vulnerable because I'm taking a risk. I'm going to rely on or have confidence in, meaning being willing to be vulnerable, that you actually come through, right? I don't have control over your actions or the outcome that my trust is going to have, but I just have to take that leap of faith, be willing to be vulnerable, and I have to take that risk.
Yeah, no, vulnerability is that's a really great word. And I don't think that's something we say often enough. Being vulnerable, which can be scary at times. And I'm jokingly thinking in my head about like the trust fall activity where you have to fall backwards into someone's arms and you have to be vulnerable and hope that someone's going to catch you, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to your second question, why is it so hard to define? Well, because it's fuzzy, it's complicated, it's multidimensional, and it's very, very, very subjective. And I think that's where this whole thing comes in, that we always talk about building trust, but we never really sit down and define it or proactively do it because we can't really, it's so subjective. It depends. Your willingness to trust someone in a business relationship will be completely different from my willingness to trust.
Yeah, it's very true. So you help a lot of companies, and I know you coach and train a lot of folks on how to do this. And I'm going a little bit off script here, but I have to, as a follow-up, ask you, When you're dealing with companies, how do you try to find subjectively like what that trust means for different people and different organizations and different industries and so on? Like, do you have a trick, or is there like a way that you can tell? Like, is it just intuition, or like how do you navigate that as you talk to people?
Yeah. So this took me a very long time to figure out because I always went by intuition.
Okay.
But I recently actually sat down and I frameworked it. I'm in the process of writing a book, and that really forced me to framework the whole process. But I also really was thinking about this more as you could almost see it as a 2 by 2 matrix, I guess,
Okay.
where it's like the willingness to be vulnerable and the perceived risk, right?
Okay.
And if your willingness to be vulnerable is high, but the risk that you perceive is low, that's a very easy trust, right?
Yeah.
The opposite is complete distrust. And then there's something in between where your willingness is high, but the risk is very high as well. So it's not an easy trust, but you're willing to extend that trust because the reward might be really big. And then there's the opposite of that, where it's your willingness is very low, but the perception of the risk is also low. So it's more like a cautious trust. I don't have much to gain, but I don't have much to lose either.
Right. Right.
So I cautiously trust you. So where we always want to go is obviously that quadrant, that easy trust. So we'll dive, I think, in the framework a little bit into the details more later, but that framework sort of gets you there.
Yeah. I love that. Very cool. I can't wait to dive more into that. But so can we talk a little bit for our listeners and for our viewers out there? Why is it important in today's business environment? I think some people are like, why are we talking about trust? I need more leads. I need more sales. I need more insert whatever that is. But I think foundationally, it all starts with trust. So can we talk about why in business it's more important than ever in today's market?
Yeah. So I'm not going to take you through the whole history of marketing and sales. I think everyone is aware of that. But it's really important just to point out that it used to be quite easy, right? I mean, if we think of the iconic Coca-Cola, I love to teach the world, and I'm sure you can finish that sentence in your head,
Yeah.
right? That was in the 70s. That was an iconic campaign. It was very memorable. People just heard it, and that's how you build trust. And then, and just to point out here, the salespeople were the one with the information. So you had to trust them. Now with the internet, everything changed. We all know the zero moment of truth. Now we're doing online research, and we're doing up to 80% of online research before and making the buying journey before we reach out to that salesperson, because we're not trusting anymore.
Yeah.
We're doing our due diligence. We want to avoid costly mistakes, and we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And then you have that now with AI, with the zero click, you have seller-free experiences that people want. Like the world is changing so much into I don't trust you at all anymore.
Yeah. No, it's so
Right?
true. We're seeing the touchless experience, sales experiences. That's what people want. And we're seeing it too. It's becoming much more predominant, especially with AI these days. You're absolutely right.
Just to finish this point off real quick, I'm going to quote Marcus here. Trust is really the single most important emotion that someone has to feel in order to exchange their money for product or services. So it doesn't matter if you predominantly sell on Facebook and that goes away, or you would go down to the daycare down the street, or you buy a donut in your donut shop. Whatever it is, ultimately you have to trust them.
Yeah. I couldn't say it better myself. And Marcus Sheridan preaches that to everybody. It's in his book, and it's definitely a core fundamental piece of the Ask You Answer. So I definitely hear you there. And can we talk to a little bit about how that affects inbound marketing? Because we started to touch on AI a little bit. There's a shift happening. So even though the technology may shift or the way people make buying decisions may change, trust is still at the core of why they feel like they should make a decision. Is that right in saying that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it completely impacts how we have to go about this, right? Because we used to have this really almost math-driven world of how many customers do you want? Oh, you just have to put out this many blog articles and you get this much traffic and you have your conversion rate.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a math problem, right? It was beautiful. But now with AI, we have the regurgitated, I love to call it regurgitated, like general content, like what is this? Or um, the value of that is almost zero.
Yeah.
So it's we can literally, I tell my coaching clients, we can just take our inbound marketing playbook and just, bury it because it's just not effective anymore. We need to focus on creating unique IP, being the ones that lead with the ideas. We can't just rely on regurgitating, being generalists anymore. We need to be in real life and on the internet that leading force in the market.
That's extremely well said. I couldn't agree with that point more. Showing your unique selling proposition is what matters, and being able to disrupt or being able to show why you're different and how you're unique is critical today. It definitely is. What are some other misconceptions that businesses have about building trust with their audience? We touched on being unique and how inbound is slowly shifting like away from doing that traditional way of marketing. But what else are some misconceptions that you see businesses have when you get on calls with them and when you're talking with them?
The biggest one is that trust sort of happens as a byproduct. It's, you know, people just feel like it's important, and we touched on that before, but no one is actively investing and saying, we are going to be the biggest teacher or the best teacher out there, or we're going to um, be better at educating our customers than anyone else in the market. I mean, a lot of the ask you answer, that's the philosophy of it. And a lot of the ask you answer people are doing this extremely successful.
Mm-hmm.
But that's maybe 1 or 2% of, global companies. There's so much more work to do. So trust isn't just something that should happen as a byproduct of doing good marketing or being great in sales. It should really be something that leads your company culture, that really is a active and proactive strategy.
So I love what you're saying. How can businesses be intentional when it comes to building trust? And you said earlier, you alluded to that there's a process that you have that we're going to go through. I'd love to dive into how businesses can do that and be very intentional with building trust.
Yeah. So there is a framework to it, and I mentioned that before. But before I go into the framework, I just want to sort of explain where this is coming from.
Okay.
Over the last 20 years, I worked at SAP Global Marketing. I did competitive battle cards. That was my first job. And one of the first things that I did there was really like, how can we write this that it's absolutely unbiased? It's transparent. And one of the key things actually that happened was my boss in the competitive intelligence department, he always used to say, you have to be able to see your work in the New York Times front page and be proud of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. I love that.
Right?
That's a great angle. No, I really like that.
So that was me being like 20 years old, right? It was my first job out of university. And you get told that, and you're in competitive intelligence, and that sort of sets the stage for everything else. So
Right.
with that sort of mindset, that stuck with me. And that's how I always treated all of my marketing and sales. Everything that I teach is really about this. Well, essentially, it comes down to then just building trust. Okay. So at 20 years, I'm trying to figure this out, really go by intuition. And now I'm like sitting down, frameworking this. And what I really learned over the last 6 months, as I'm really sitting down and doing the research on it, completely changed my entire view on this.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I'm going to talk you through the framework, and I think that it makes a lot more sense. Okay?
I'm excited. No, this is great. And I love the intention, like just to what your boss is saying previously at your last engagement. It's like, be intentional, really be honest, find the deeper meaning behind it, and be purposeful with it. And I think that's so important, especially now more than ever. So I'm excited to hear your framework here. Let's go.
All right. So there's three sort of layers to it.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people will listen to this. So I'll explain it as best as I can. The bottom one is like a fundamental layer. This is where we build cognitive trust. It's fact-based. Maybe it's just a one-off transaction, or maybe it's the initial transaction, but these steps have to be taken to build trust no matter what. Okay? And these three steps are competence, reliability, and integrity. So competence just refers to the fact of, do you actually physically have the ability to be good on your promise? Do you have the technical capability? Do you have the factory? Do you have the expertise if you're a coach? Like, do you actually have the thing that it takes to make that promise come true, to meet
Okay.
my expectation?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Reliability is, have you done this reliably in the past? Are you being consistent in your outcome? Do you have standardized processes that guarantee that that outcome will be for me as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And these two are very, very interlinked because competence gets strengthened by reliability. Reliability strengthens competence. It's like a little circle.
Totally. They definitely go hand in hand. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now there's a layer over that I included because I want to have that coming through on the promise, right? Integrity. Integrity allows us, it's like, are you going to stick to your ethical standards that you set for yourself? Meaning, even if you have the technical capability and you've reliably delivered in the past, will you actually come through because you're ethically feeling like you need to deliver this to me? Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, that makes total sense so far. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so now we've really built the foundation, but it's really sort of fragile trust, right? It's maybe just a one-time thing.
Yeah, but you
I
need
just
that.
rely on the technical.
Yeah, and you need that foundation in order to build upon anything else. So that's a critical piece right there. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the next layer is what I call transitional. All right. The next layer is transitional,
Okay.
and that takes that fundamental layer and adds that emotional and relationship building component to it.
Oh,
Right.
I see.
Now we're talking about having empathy, respect, and benevolence. So if we have empathy, we really understand and can feel what the other person is feeling, what their problems, worries, and concerns are. We really truly understand and we can empathize with them. Respect is really that I respect that you give me money and I will honor that and give you the service. Or I'm going to treat your personal data respectfully. Or I'm actually respecting that you give me trust and I will return that with. So there's a back and forth between the empathy and the respect, but it just takes another layer of emotion there.
Absolutely.
And then benevolence is just, do they have my best interest at heart? And just tying it really, for me, that's really a big, always assignment selling, right?
Mm.
If we teach sales teams to have that empathy, respect, and benevolence, and listening to our buyers' concerns, giving them good content, respecting their time, being respectful of everyone's time,
Yeah.
and then also being able to walk away and say, you know what, you might not be the best fit for us, or we are not the best fit for you. So making sure they really truly understand and have all the information they need to make the best decision for them.
Absolutely. No, assignment selling is such a critical piece to this. And I love that you mentioned that, because when you address people's fears, worries, doubts, concerns before they start to voice them, it shows how empathetic you are and how much foresight you have into meeting them where they are. And that helps build trust so much faster. And we've seen it time and time again. So I think that's a really critical piece that you highlighted there. And it works. If you do it right, it works really well. And that's another thing too, is you made a good point, and I love that you said this, that sometimes it doesn't work out, and it's okay that it doesn't work out, and you may not be the best fit. And sometimes people don't see that or address that, and they try to force the issue, and that completely breaks the trust, and that's where you start to have bigger problems. So sometimes to be intentional with like, hey, maybe this isn't the best fit and we want you to be successful, so we wish you the best of luck, or however that exchange goes, it also really builds a huge amount of trust. And I think that's a big point that people should be hearing and hopefully listening to.
Yeah.
All right.
And the empathy part is actually from Connor, because I had a conversation with Connor about assignment selling, and he said that sometimes, when he talks to a business owner and they share their problems and they have and he just sometimes, because he's a very empathetic person,
He is.
he just sits with them and says, wow, that must be really hard. And
Yeah.
pause.
Yeah.
And they get to feel that, hey, this person sees me for a human. I'm not just a deal. I'm a real human to them. So kudos to Connor for
Yes.
the empathy.
Connor Delaney, who's a regular on the show here, and we've learned a lot from him, and he does a great job, not selling, but building trust with a lot of folks out there. And shout out to Connor. Yeah, for sure. All right. So once we get past the transitional piece, the empathetic piece, what comes next?
So here's where I think some of the magic happens. And that's why I call it transformational.
Okay.
Now we're taking that fundamental, the cognitive and fact-based that we now layered and deepened the trust with the emotional. But now we validating that, not only externally, but also with our social norms, with our shared values, because something I should have maybe mentioned earlier is a lot of the business related trust building is based on epistemic trust. Epistemic trust is a form of trust that is based on communicated information.
Okay.
And if we hear that communicated information, we have to decide, is that messenger legit? Can we trust the message? But then there's a lot of internal stuff that also goes on. For example, is it an authoritative figure that is communicating this message? Should I trust them?
Right.
There's also a lot of social norms going on where there's validation coming in from external sources. So that's why I included here social proof. So this is your normal customer case studies, testimonials, customer journey videos, all that, reviews, best of, like all that stuff.
Right.
But then there's a layer of shared values. So for example, do I have, for example, I really am into sustainability. So I love my Patagonia jacket because I know they have the same shared value. And I will always buy a Patagonia jacket because I really align with their values, or their values align with mine.
Right. Right.
And then there's another layer that's social alignment, and that's the third one in this layer, which means it's very related to the shared value, but it's social alignment. And social alignment really relates to, is choosing this the socially accepted choice?
Gotcha. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
People in my circle, are they going to be okay with it? And it shouldn't always be the thing that makes the trust, but we're social creatures as humans, and psychologically that drives a lot of trust.
It absolutely plays into it. Whether we want it to or like to admit it or not, it does play into that. So that's a really important piece. Wow. Very cool. I love how you laid that out, and I really think it makes a lot of sense when it comes to building trust. So how does this play out as you start to talk to people? And I'm going a little bit off script here, but like, are there shortcuts to building trust, or are there ways that you can make this happen faster or slower? So like for people listening and watching, I'm sure they're like, how do I do this? If I'm on a call with a potential client, like what's the fastest way to do this, or the path of least resistance?
Yeah. So there's no shortcuts in building trust. I think that's not really going to be a surprise. Trust has to be earned, but there are certainly accelerators.
Okay.
And I tend to there's certain types of companies who are inherently want to do the right thing. Their core DNA is, I want to do right what's right for my customer.
Hmm.
I really want to. I couldn't care less about my competitors. I couldn't care less about all those naysayers. I'm just gonna go for it. And those companies are gonna be really successful in if they invest in that because
Hmm.
there is there's like three accelerators that I've identified so far. Being transparent, which makes a lot of sense if you think about competence, reliability, integrity. It's great if you have all these things, but you need to communicate them. People need to know about your competence. They
Absolutely.
need to know it, right?
Yes.
So being
Yes.
100% transparent, if it's sometimes uncomfortable, that's part of the deal. But the result of that is having an educated customer,
Right.
one who really truly makes the best choice for them.
Yeah.
The second part of this is being unapologetically aligned with what your customer needs. And unapologetically, I put in here because it will piss people off. It will piss your competitors off if you do that, right? Marcus was actually sharing at Impact the other day a story where he was doing exactly that. And that was when he changed having instead of sand, gravel underneath the fiberglass pools
Right.
because it's just better. It doesn't get washed away, it holds longer. And that is truly being unapologetically aligned with your customers' needs. And that results in advocacy. So now you're advocating for fair pricing in the market. You're advocating on behalf of your customers to have outdated practices like the sand versus the gravel, you know, being obsolete and changing that.
Yeah, and you're right. It did disrupt and piss some of his competition off, but that's what the customers wanted. That's what the marketplace needed. So unfortunately, it's almost like change is inevitable and it has to happen. And you're either going to lead that charge or you're going to be following somebody else who's leading that charge. And I think the goal here, especially when we're talking about trust, is to be at the forefront and to be unapologetic about it and just go for it because you know deep down that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the third accelerator is, I think, my favorite. And sort of it's a consequence of the other two,
Okay.
disruption. Like actually physically, not just advocating, but doing something about it, changing the thing in the market.
Right.
And when you actually are brave enough and courageous enough to do that, and one of my customers is making massive courageous changes right now in a very um, old-fashioned and very closed industry,
Hmm.
my God, it's like a game changer. And all of a sudden you become the leader of that industry. That Marcus calls it the voice of trust, but you're the most trusted brand in your space, and all of a sudden people are looking up to you. They're not sensitive about price anymore because they want to work with the best,
Right.
right? They want to work with the people that they trust more or the most.
I couldn't agree more. And disruption, I think sometimes disruption may have a negative connotation and people almost cringe when they hear it. They're like, "Ooh, no, we don't want to rock the proverbial boat." Yeah, exactly. But the results and what's possible if you have the courage to do what we're talking about is substantial, and it can really be a game changer, not just for your customers, but for your industry at large, which is exciting. Yeah. So how can companies implement this and start putting this into their processes and start practicing it and start like living and actually breathing what we're talking about?
Um, so taking absolutely to heart that you have from a corporate culture perspective,
Hmm.
if that resonates with you that you want to do the right thing, then I would definitely say think about defining what that looks like for you. And I've because it's so fuzzy and because it's so difficult to pin it down, I'm currently creating like a assessment that people can just take and based on where they're at in that assessment, they then could see what the next step should be. So for each of the 9 steps that I laid out before, I'm going to have like a emerging, intermediate, and like leadership layer of what does it look like to be a leader in competence, communicating your competence. And there's going to be very specific elements that you can check off and say, okay, in order to sustain or advance in my level of competence, I need to do these things. I need to do these 5 things.
Yeah.
Once I've done that, I move on to reliability. Okay, I'm like just crossed over from emerging to intermediate. Here are my next things that I'm going to do. So
Gotcha.
that assessment, when it comes out, hopefully early 2025, should give people a really clear step-by-step plan.
That's very exciting. I love it. And just for everyone out there, Hannah coaches and trains a lot of companies on this. You're extremely good at doing this. And I really appreciate all your insights and sharing this wealth of knowledge about trust, which I think we needed a deep dive on this. So could you, this is the point in the show where I want you to just shout out if people want to get in touch with you, if people want to learn more from you, how can they do that?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, I think, the best place.
Okay.
Hannah Eisenberg.
Hannah Eisenberg on LinkedIn. We'll make sure to put it in the show notes and make sure that all your contact info is there so people can reach out because you're an excellent resource. All right, so now for my favorite part of the show, it's the one thing moment. I just want to ask for this whole conversation we had about trust and all the different steps you can take and the different levels of building trust. What's the one thing that people really need to think about as they're going through building trust with their customers?
That's a good question. So the one thing I would say that people should take away is when you make a marketing decision or a sales decision, ask yourself, is it going to induce more trust? If the answer is yes, go ahead. It's probably the right thing to do. If it's no, or I'm not entirely sure, it's probably a waste of time.
Well said. Well said. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for your time and for being on the show. We're definitely going to have you back on and talk again in the future.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. I enjoyed myself.
Excellent. Excellent. And for everybody there watching and listening, this is Endless Customers. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.